So, welcome to another edition of Open for Business. And today we have a very special guest, Coach Roy Austin. Thank you for being on Open for Business, Roy.
Thank you for having me, Marjorie. It's a pleasure.
So, guys, you are in for a real treat. Not only does this guy have a CPA, he's got an MBA, and he helps small businesses do better business. And you tell me about the book that you just came out with.
Well, Marjorie, the book came about through all the business coaching I've been doing for the last 10 years. And one of the things that I noticed was that most small businesses get in trouble because they don't understand the accounting side. And in a lot of cases, they ignore the accounting side because it's not something they enjoy doing or they understand. And that usually gets them in trouble. So I started buying books that were, quote, accounting for non-numbers people. About 8 of them. They were horrible. I couldn't imagine any of my clients getting past page 2. So eventually I thought, well, maybe I can do a better job of this and make it a little bit more engaging. But as I got into the project, I realized that small businesses needed help, not just with accounting, but with all the major business functions, because most of them have never been to business college or had an MBA or anything like that. So, it's marketing, it's HR, it's hiring, it's managing.
All of your background.
All those different functions. And so it eventually evolved into essentially a user's manual or success guide, if you will, to help small businesses understand the basics. It's not designed to be a comprehensive marketing guide or, accounting course, but as long as you understand enough so that you know where to look, what to look for, and how to use the information.
Gosh, I wish we were actually live and so small businesses could pose their questions to you. But I'm so excited to be hearing some of these tips and advice from you, because that's what Open for Business is all about. But before we get to the tips and advice, you've also been very busy. You're an ambassador of the BLUFFTON Chamber of Commerce, and your latest endeavor is the Library for Kids International.
Right.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, a year ago, September, I went to Africa. I had always wanted to see the animals in the wild while they're still in the wild.
Yeah.
And the tour included lots of visits to homes and schools and villages and churches and markets and so forth. I didn't care about that. All I wanted to do was see the animals in the wild. And if I had to put up with all this cultural stuff, so be it. But a funny thing happened. I really came to enjoy getting to know and talking with the African people, hearing their stories, and particularly sitting down in the schools with the kids who all spoke English. And I was so impressed at how anxious they were and excited to learn. School was a privilege. It's not something, oh, I got to go to school. They're excited to get to school. And we were visiting one school in Amboseli National Park in Kenya. And one of the people in our group asked the teacher, do you have a library? And she said, well, no, but we'd love to. And, I couldn't get that out of my head. And I kept thinking, well, surely we can get some books donated and ship them over there. So when I got home, I started working on this project. And the first thing I think that I ran into was a number of people that told me, forget it. Can't be done. Books are too expensive. They'll never get through customs, so forth. Well, one of my philosophies of life has been for a long time, focus on the objective, not the obstacle. And I see a lot of small businesses doing that, or people that want to start a small business, and they'll think, well, if I start this, I'll have all these problems. Well, anything worthwhile is going to have problems. So don't focus on the problems, focus on the objective that you're trying to accomplish.
That's a great tip.
I'm a big believer in contrary opinions. And so when somebody says they don't think it's a good idea, that should force you to reevaluate and think about it. But just to say can't be done is a different situation. And there were obstacles. Books are expensive to ship over there, but we found that if you mail them through the post office, it's a fraction of the cost of shipping it by FedEx. We found that customs over there is not interested in used books. There's no black market for used books. And so they have gotten through to schools and people in Tanzania and Nairobi, and we've now shipped to 3 schools. I'm getting ready to ship to a 4th school. They're all packed up. I'm just waiting for some information from them.
Where are you getting the books from, Roy?
The books are donated, and we send every school a set of encyclopedias, and along with a lot of other books. But the first thing we want to get them is a set of encyclopedias, because essentially that's Google to them. They don't have the internet.
Wow.
And yes, some information is outdated in the encyclopedias, but the vast majority of it is still relevant, and it gives them a resource. Because let me give you a good story. The lady that created our website, who is Kenyan, lives over there near Nairobi. I asked her, I said, why are you such an enthusiastic volunteer for this project? And she said to me, well, when I was in primary school, which over there is grades 1 through 8, she said, there were 30 to 40 kids in my class. We all shared one textbook. They had one English book, one Swahili book, and one math book. And they all had to share it. And she's been going around and collecting stories from other students and teachers, and this is not an untypical situation. You might have 5 to 10 kids sharing a book. Well, if you can imagine that, that's real competitive. But that's why they're so excited to learn. And
I love your subtitle on it, Creating the Future Leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, Roy, what you've done is real leadership. You saw a problem and you're solving it.
Well, actually, that slogan didn't come from me. It came from another fella in Kenya who I found that created the logo.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up with that slogan, and I thought, wow, that's just perfect. So we're making great progress, and it has grown much farther and much faster than I ever would have imagined.
So before we get into the tips and advice on Open for Business, if somebody's interested in getting involved with your organization, the nonprofit, what do they need to do? Where can they donate books?
I would say the best thing is to go to our website, which is libraries4kids.org, and you can click on the Contact Us button and email me. But that's probably the easiest. It's just libraries4kids.org. Very
good. Very good. Well, we'll have to do another interview and find out how it goes this upcoming year. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, let's talk about small business. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that I get to interview a CPA and an MBA. So, what is the number one reason small businesses fail? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier.
Number one, I would put up there with not understanding the numbers, not understanding the accounting side. And you don't need to be an expert. You don't have to be an accountant. But you need to understand enough so that you can ask intelligent questions of whoever's doing your accounting.
For instance, let's pretend we have a car mechanic shop or something.
I'll give you a good example. I had one client, and he needed a set of financial statements to get a bank loan. And I went and looked at his QuickBooks, and there was nothing in it, just revenues and receivables. So I thought, well, okay, we can, from his bank records and his credit card statements, we can recreate his books, but we need to reconcile his bank statement. So we know how much money we got to start with. So I said, who reconciles your bank statement? And he said, well, my CPA does that. So I contacted the CPA. And he called me back a couple of days later and he said, well, you know, I've been really busy. I haven't reconciled the bank statement in 3 years. Now, whose fault is that?
It's actually a small business owner, I think.
It's the owner. Yeah. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that you should be asking your whoever's doing your accounting for bank reconciliations every month, for a set of financial statements every month. If you don't understand something in the financial statements, you ask. And, you know, again, you don't have to be an accountant to know when something is wrong. I had another fellow who was asked me to take a look at his QuickBooks, and we pulled it up, and he showed year against year. And I said, well, let's expand that and look at it month by month. And he said, well, you can do that? I said, yeah. So we looked at it month by month, scrolled down through his expenses, and there was one line item that was $3,000 a month exactly every month until November. And then in November, it was $12,000. And I asked him, I said, what happened in November? He said, well, I don't know. So let's drill down and find out. Well, there was a one-time expense that had been coded to the wrong place. Now, and so fortunately, there was no fraud involved. But you know, you don't have to be an accountant to know that when you see a blip like that, there's something wrong. There's a question that needs to be asked.
So that's a really good tip, is check your financials monthly, if not weekly, and compare them month to month and year to year.
Yeah. So, you know, again, it's not a matter of being an expert in accounting. It's just knowing where to look, what to look for, and how to use the information.
So, you know, one of the big complaints about accountants or CPAs or bookkeepers is sometimes the small business owners, they don't really understand the difference.
Right.
And like, you'll have a CPA do all your books, but they don't really do tax financial planning unless they have that degree. But you know, when you go to ask for financial advice, you would think a CPA would give it to you, but
some do. But one of my complaints, and I like to pick on my CPA friends, is they focus almost exclusively on taxes. And
but they go hand in hand. I wish more accountants would.
They go hand in hand, but a lot of times you should never let tax strategy override business strategy. So for instance, had somebody who wanted to save on taxes, their CPA said, well, you know, buy some equipment. You can write it off. So they went out and bought a $375,000 piece of equipment, which they borrowed the money for. I found out about it about a month after they did it. They did it on December 30th, thinking they could take $375,000 in bonus depreciation. Well, but they didn't take possession of the equipment until January, so they couldn't write it off. So when I found out about it, I said, well, how much revenue do you expect to bring in? And they said, oh, this is going to open doors for us. Well, 2 years later, it hadn't brought in any revenue. And they decided maybe we just need to sell it, and hopefully we can get back out of it what we paid for it. And then, of course, we said, well, you realize you took all the depreciation in year two. If you sell it now, you have to recapture that. We do. Well, the CPA was telling them how they could save money on taxes, but didn't take into consideration what is the business strategy of this business. You know, the owner had just asked, how can I save money? And they answered. But in the larger context, this piece of equipment did not fit with their strategy.
So what would you have told that business owner if they had contacted you first?
I would have said, all right, how much revenue is this thing going to bring in? I mean, are you going to be able to get? I mean, how are you going to do that? Just saying it'll open doors for us is not an answer.
How would you predict that?
I think you you got to have looked at the business and say, all right, who's going to use this? What do we need this for? How is it going to help us? You see stuff like people go out and they'll buy an $80,000 pickup when a $20,000 pickup will do the job. Well,
so what's the rule on that at the end of the year? Like you can write off how much if you do buy a truck?
Depreciation and bonus tax deductions change every year, so you do need to get your CPA's advice in that. But if your CPA is not advising you on your business strategy and only looking at your tax strategy, you need to get somebody else to take a look at it also.
What percentage of accountants, CPAs do both of that?
That's a good question, but I really don't know. I know of one that is pretty good at that because he was a former chief financial officer for a large corporation, so he understands.
Yeah.
But a lot of CPAs, they went to college, they got the accounting education, they passed the CPA exam, and all they've ever done is taxes.
So I love this tip. Find a CPA that also has a business background that will give you some business strategy.
And when you ask them about saving taxes or anything else, you want to say, let's sit down and talk about it in the context of my overall business strategy. What am I trying to accomplish next year? Does this fit with my goals? Is this providing was that piece of equipment providing a service that customers have told me that they needed?
So what advice do you have on business strategies? With it being the end of the year now, what would you tell small business owners on how to prepare for the next year?
Well, this is the time when we all set goals, right? And we're sitting down, and probably a lot of your listeners have heard the term SMART goals. Is the goal specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And is it time bound? Do I have a deadline for accomplishing it? And a lot of times it'll be, well, I'm going to grow revenue 20% or something like that. Now, there's something missing from that SMART acronym. Because a lot of times when I ask people, say, well, how are you going to grow revenues 20% next year? And the answer is, well, I'm going to work harder. Or, something like that. You got to add an S onto the SMART acronym. What's the strategy? How are you going to accomplish the goal?
Can you think of an example right off the top of your head?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. Okay. Let's say my goal is to get up at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Is that specific? Like measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? If I don't get up at 6:30, I don't make my appointments. And it's got a time deadline on it. What's the strategy?
Okay, wonderful.
You set the alarm.
Yeah.
Go to bed. Another more humorous example is many years ago, I was home on leave from the Army, and my father took me to his annual Christmas luncheon with his buddies. And we sat down at the table, and the waiter came to take the drink orders. And the man across the table from me ordered 5 Manhattans. And the waiter came and lined up 5 Manhattans in front of him. And I was fascinated because I was thinking, what's going on here? So finally he got up and left, and I turned to my father and I said, Dad, what's the deal with Mr. Bear and the 5 Manhattans? And he said, well, Lee figures that he can drink 5 and still be sober enough to drive home. But if he orders them one at a time, he loses count.
Oh dear.
So
strategy.
What strategy? When he's drunk the 5 of them and they're gone, it's time to go home.
So that tip would be much more specific for your strategy.
Right.
Action items, list out everything you need to do to obtain it.
Yeah. Yep.
Hmm. So, what you want to get? If we could talk about HR, do you have any advice?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just so excited to be talking to a CPA and an MBA and somebody who's
So,
run their own business. And
on the HR side, we are in a labor market right now that's got a shortage of people. When I go to my BNI meetings, I hear it all the time. I can't find people, or I'm looking for new people, or whatever. Um, and that's, it is tough, but it's important to find the right people,
right.
not just a body to fill a slot.
What is the process for that? That might be a good question. On
You
how to
just,
do that.
that's the whole first section of my book. Because you want to find people who are excited about your vision for the future. They believe in your mission. Uh, they,
How do you tell that though, Roy? How do you tell that they're excited? Is it what they say, their body language? Is it a
well,
okay?
usually when people are interviewed, they're asked what? About their experience and
Right.
their education. Okay, which is great. But whoever asks questions about, this is my vision, how do you see yourself fitting into it? This is our mission. Is that something that excites you? These are our values, and try to find out what their values are. Are the two in sync? Uh, would you be comfortable operating in our culture, which is, I define it in the book as operating principles. This is the way we do things here. But you structure questions around those things, what I call your business fundamentals, your vision, your mission, your values, and your operating principles to find out. Uh, and then, you know,
Great insight.
it,
Great.
hmm, so it,
So
uh,
on the opposite end, how do you know when to let an employee go, and what mistakes do small business owners do in that scenario?
well, of course, that letting somebody go is never easy. And the few times that I've had to do it, it was very unpleasant, both for me and for the person. Um, Sometimes it becomes necessary because of economic circumstances of the business, and sometimes it becomes necessary because of the person. I always used to tell my staff, I expect you to make mistakes.
Okay.
I make mistakes. We're all human. We all make mistakes. I also expect you to learn from those mistakes and not make them again. And tell me how you're going to prevent the mistake from happening in the future. Um, if you try to hide your mistake from me, now we got a problem.
Yeah.
Come and admit it. And, admittedly, it took a while for people to believe that I was sincere about this.
And they
But
were.
after a while, they became comfortable with, Roy's not going to, reprimand me or demote me or fire me if I admit that I made a mistake.
Mhm.
But I think that is important. And I think you also, it's hard enough to find good employees, but when you find the one that's a star, you want to keep them because the stars have opportunities to go wherever they want to go. And there's lots of job openings for people that are really good. Your mediocre and particularly your poor performers will never leave because nobody wants them.
Mhm.
So how are you going to keep those stars? Well, a
Yeah. What
lot
are
of
the
times,
strategies?
a lot of times those stars, and I'm thinking of one person in particular who moved from Texas back here to Bluffton because he believed in the vision of the owner of the business. He had worked for him before. He loved their mission. He shared their values, and he liked working in their culture or under their operating principles. He was willing to take less money uh, to do something that he loved with people that he loved doing it with. And I think that's the way you keep you got a better chance of keeping your stars if they have bought into who you are and what you're trying to accomplish.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And more great insight. Let's talk about sales.
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have a salesperson that works just on commission. How do you, are industries all different of how much commission they keep?
I think every industry and every company has a different structure. Some are commission, some are salary plus commission. I think, and I'm thinking of one particular situation where when this guy was being interviewed for a sales position, he told him right up front, I don't work under commission. Either pay me a salary or, I'll work somewhere else.
Okay.
To me, that's a red flag. A really good salesperson would say, yeah, I want to get commission.
Mm-hmm.
Small business owners sometimes are reluctant to pay commissions because they're afraid that the salesperson will make more money than they do. You want them to make more money than you do.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're making more money than you are, they are contributing a lot of money to your bottom line.
Absolutely.
Which is going to make you more money. I mean, a good salesperson should bring in 3 to 4 times what they're being paid. And a lot of really good ones will probably bring in 10 times what they're being paid.
So I've heard anywhere from 6% to 50%. Mm-hmm. What have you heard?
I can't, really haven't heard that, Marjorie. So, again, it's going to be industry specific. 6% commission on a $100,000 sale is one thing. 6% on $100 sales is not too exciting.
Right.
I don't know that there's one hard, rule of thumb there.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about marketing. What are the biggest mistakes small business owners make when it comes to marketing?
It's funny. I get people that come to me and they'll say, I've got this great idea and people really need it. Okay. That's good. You do want something that people need. However, the real question is, do they want it? And to give you an example. All of us need an estate plan. None of us are immortal, so sooner or later we're going to go to the other side, so to speak. But how many of us have one? Well, I can do that later. It costs money to hire a lawyer. I mean, there's all kinds of excuses. I've got other things that need to take priority. It's something that we all need, but it's not something that we either want or we want right now.
Yeah.
And, the often that product that somebody's excited about that they feel like people need is, yeah, I've talked to a few friends and they thought it was a great idea. When you talk to your friends, what you want to find is somebody that thinks it's a bad idea.
Great insight.
Because when you talk to somebody that says, hey, Marjorie, that's a great idea, what have you learned?
Nothing.
Just
confirmed what you already.
Right. So, okay, that boosts your ego and your confidence a little bit, but you want to find somebody who doesn't think it's a good idea because that should force you to think. Mm-hmm. And you reevaluate and take a look at your situation. Another thing that's unrealistic is people don't do enough research to find out how many people would be interested or want your product.
So how would you go about doing that if you had one of these estate planning companies? Mm-hmm. What would be the first steps?
Well, we've got the great resource now of Google. So you've got all kinds of opportunities to try to evaluate the size of your market. Mm-hmm. If there are not enough people that need it, let alone want it, there's no point in going any farther. So there's expensive ways to do it and hiring market research consultants and all that sort of stuff, but you can gain a tremendous amount of information just by spending time researching it on the internet to find out how big this market is. If it's, is it something that's just for urban consumers that live within a 2-block area? maybe that's not such a great idea.
Be interesting to see how many people on Google actually search those terms. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it 100 a month or is it 10,000 a
Yeah.
month? I mean, that would be interesting insight too.
Well, there's no shortage of information out there, and so you can, in some cases, you can almost get overwhelmed by it.
Right.
But you got to do the research. You got to figure out, is there anybody else? How many people need it? Where are they? Who are they? What does your target market look like? Um, are they men or women? Are they multiracial? Only within one particular small location? Or are they countrywide?
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's going to depend on the type of business that you want to build. One of the things that I think I found was most business books are designed for mega corporations. There's a few really good ones out there, like E-Myth Revisited, that is
Oh, I
designed
love
for
that.
small businesses, but most of them are designed for large corporations. Now, and the assumption is that everybody who starts a business wants to become a mega corporation, and I don't buy that.
I don't either, Roy.
I think the vast majority of people that start a business, they start it because they know how to do the work, and then they find out doing the work and running a business are two different skill sets. But they're not interested in being huge. They may want to, expand some in their own local area, but basically they want to earn a nice living for their family, make a contribution to their community,
Mm-hmm.
and do something that they love doing.
Yep. So, that leads me to the next question. Small business owners can be consumed by small business.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the best strategies for balancing family with small business? If there are.
It's interesting. One of the companies that I interviewed for the book, because I interviewed 18 small businesses, it was, the emphasis was on small business.
Mm-hmm.
And, knowing and working with small businesses, I know that they don't have much time to read. So I intentionally made the chapters short. I, interjected humor, stories, particularly stories from all the 18 companies that I interviewed, and a lot of graphics. The publisher told me, don't put color graphics in here. That's a waste of money. And I said, nope, we're putting it in there because I think it makes the book more entertaining. But now I lost my train of thought on your question.
I'm talking about balance.
Balance. One of the companies I interviewed was a Calf Killer Brewery in Sparta, Tennessee. And fascinating story about all the people that told them it couldn't be done. Sparta was in the White County, Tennessee, which is a dry county. And it took them about 8 years before they finally got up and running. And they have a very unique philosophy about their beer. But I asked them, I said, what has been the biggest challenge in this? And I was expecting to say, regulatory hoops they had to jump through or raising the money to do things. And Dave and Don Sergio said, no, it's balancing our work and our family life. Because he said, we are so consumed and enjoy this so much, we could be brewing beer all day long. And trying out new recipes and new ways of doing things. So it is a tough thing, but
how did they solve that?
I think they just, one of my time management principles is you make appointments with yourself.
Talk more about that. That's
Okay.
Another great tip, insight.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to maintain a balance. Well, and you've got all kinds of forces that are pulling at you from all over the place. The phone rings and emails come in and texts come in and people stop by your office, and before you know it, the whole day's shot and you haven't gotten accomplished. I think it's important to make appointments with yourself, whether it's to work on the business or you say, okay, at 5 o'clock or whatever, however your work schedule is, the office is closed. It can wait till tomorrow. And, you know, I was guilty when I first started doing business coaching 10 years ago. You know, I'm popping up to every time I hear an email come in or something, I'm popping up to look at it and all excited and fine. You know, you finally come to the realization that 98% of this stuff can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not urgent and critical that you answer it or do it right now. But you will wind up in trouble if you're not balancing your family with your business.
How did they end up balancing it? Did they schedule time for family or?
You know, I think basically that's what they did. The funny thing is the brewery is on a farm in the middle of nowhere in the country in near Sparta, Tennessee. And so they had converted an old barn into their brewery. In fact, they bought up stainless steel milking equipment from dairy farms that went out of business and cobbled it together to create brewing equipment. But
Smart.
you know,
Very entrepreneurial.
the brewery was right next to their home.
Yeah.
There's two brothers, so you know, the one brother and his wife and family lived right next door. Well, when you're right next to the office like that, it's easy to get sucked into going back and forth. And you know, they had to maintain the balance. In fact, I was up there a couple of weeks ago and was talking to them. They got great beer, by the way, and a really funny story. But they had to make time. Said, okay, at this point, the brewery shuts down and we go home. Sometimes that, for some people, that's hard. But if you don't do that, if your family life suffers, your business is going to suffer.
Right. It's going to be out of balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's a funny thing, the difference between being balanced and having passion. And as a small business owner, I know that passion is what drives your business. So if you don't have the passion, yeah, you just got to know when to stop. Just hold,
Right.
You know.
And it's interesting you mentioned passion too, Marjorie, because I read a book one time about that, and this guy credited his success to his passion. So being the business coach, I thought, okay, how do I teach somebody to be passionate?
A
Can't
lot.
do it. You can't do it.
Why? Yeah. Why am I doing this? Well, no, you have to have it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's something that it is important, but it's not a skill that can be taught. It is something that you feel inside and you feel, all right, this is the mission that God's called me to do, and I'm going to put all my efforts into it.
And I think most of small businesses, if they have a trade or a passion that they like, that's what they live on. And it's a good thing they have it, because once they get into it, they realize it's not 9 to 5. It's weekends, and it's so much more. So that's a good thing.
You really never stop thinking about it, but you do have to.
But it's good because we're passionate about it. You know,
Yeah.
We love it. We know it's moving the needle for small business, you know, in our community.
And I think that's another, you know, leads to another reason why a lot of small businesses fail. People start them because they want to work for themselves, and they're tired of
It's a great American dream.
They don't want somebody else telling them what to do and how to do it. But sometimes they get into a business that is not something that they are super passionate about. Yeah, and they burn out. You know, after a few years, I had a guy come to me one time, Marjorie, and he said, I want to buy a business. And I said, well, what kind of business? He said, doesn't matter. I just want to buy a business. I've retired. I've got $650,000 to invest, and I've got investors that'll put in another $750,000. I said, what are you passionate about? Oh, no, I just want to buy a business. He's doomed. He is doomed.
Well, how did he get $650,000? Was he an employee?
It was his retirement plan that he had, you know, worked for a large corporation and he had saved his money up. And the sad part is he probably blew it on something. But I said, you know, if you haven't got something that you're passionate about, I can't really help you out here.
That's really good counsel. That's super good counsel. Yeah, because it is the gasoline that runs your company.
Yeah. I mean, you may find out after a couple of years that what you've done is you're not no longer working for somebody else, but you've just created a different kind of a job.
Yeah.
And you're
Not working for somebody else. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Roy, looking back on your career, starting your own business, what is something that you didn't know that you wish you had known when you started?
Hmm. That's a really open-ended question, Marjorie. um, you caught me off guard here a little bit. I'm not sure. I mean, I've learned so much.
Well, you're so prepared having the MBA and the CPA and your background. I mean, that's why you started it, because you knew all those things.
You know, I think one of the challenges has been keeping up with technology,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I was at a Bluffton chamber meeting one time, and they just hired this young girl who was what 18 or 19 or 20 or something like that, and somebody said something, and I said, yeah, it's as you can see here on my brochure, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. And she turned to me and said, "You're on Twitter?" It's like,
Yes.
and then she went, "Oh my God." um, yeah, I mean, if you're not, moving forward, you're moving backward. And
How do you keep up with all the trends? What's your best source?
I think you have to be a reader.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Whether you're talking about blogs or magazines or books, there's,
YouTube.
one of my biggest, one of the things I think hurts a lot of small businesses is say, well, I don't like to read. Well, if you don't like to read, what you're really saying in a way is, I already know everything I need to know.
Yep.
And none of
That's
us will ever know it.
I
None
love
of us
that.
will ever know everything we need to know. We can always, if you're not growing, you're decaying.
Absolutely. I personally read every day, and I think that should
Mm-hmm.
be a strategy for every small business owner is to read every day.
You might, you
Learn
it's
something every day.
you make an appointment, whatever's convenient for you. I mean, get to the office 10 or 15 minutes early, even if you only read a little bit.
And now there's podcasts, and they're so easy. You
Right.
can download them and listen to them
Mm-hmm.
going to work. And
Yeah.
there's really no excuse not to be learning.
No.
I mean, it's a competitive advantage to
Mm-hmm.
be ahead of these other small business owners.
And you can't just stop at, all right, I'm going to keep up with some technical things in my industry. What's the latest in the plumbing or the HVAC industry or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep up with what are new and interesting different ways of managing the business. How can I improve on that?
And that's where hiring somebody like you as a coach, you can make sure you don't step on a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Roy, you have been there and done that. And I certainly appreciate you sharing some insights with the small business community. And for folks that are interested in buying his book, where do they go?
Well, my website is alligatorbusinesssolution.com. Or if you would like a signed copy, you can email me at rockwell@hargray.com.
So before we sign off, what is one thing that you wish every small business owner knows?
I would have to say know themselves.
Okay.
It's not just about improving your business; it's about improving yourself.
A whole life approach.
I've got a coffee mug I had made. In fact, when I sign all my books, it says that simply says, "Be the best you that you can be." It's not about comparing yourself to somebody else.
Right.
There will always be other people who are more competent and more knowledgeable and more skilled in various areas than you are. The question is, are you becoming better at who you are and what you do? So compare yourself to yourself, not to other people, and be the best you that you can be.
What beautiful words of wisdom. Thank you so much for being on Open for Business.
Thank you, Marjorie. It was my pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And we will talk to y'all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.